Civil wars have been among the most brutal and transformative conflicts throughout history, reshaping not only the nations that suffer through them, but also the broader principles and doctrines of military strategy. Unlike international wars, civil conflicts often force combatants to adopt unconventional tactics, adapt to irregular environments, and contend with deep-rooted ideological, political, and social factors. In this script, we will explore how civil wars, through their unique and complex nature, have influenced the evolution of military strategy, doctrine, and tactics. Civil wars often involve irregular forces, such as insurgent groups or militias, fighting against established state armies. This type of warfare differs substantially from conventional interstate wars, where regular armies engage on clear fronts. In civil wars, battle lines are often blurred, and non-state actors challenge formal military structures. This creates a dynamic environment in which traditional military tactics and strategies are often insufficient or require significant adaptation. One major impact of civil wars on military strategy is the necessity to incorporate unconventional or asymmetric tactics. Insurgents, lacking the resources and organization of a state army, must rely on guerrilla tactics, such as hit-and-run attacks, sabotage, and ambushes to level the playing field. These tactics force state militaries to adapt their operations, often focusing on counterinsurgency strategies rather than traditional battlefield engagements. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, provides a key example of how civil conflicts shape military strategy. Although it began as a relatively conventional war between two state armies, the Union and the Confederacy, it quickly evolved into a conflict that demanded innovative military thinking. Both sides had to adapt to new technologies, such as rifled muskets and railroads, which extended the scope and scale of military operations. The Union, under General Ulysses S. Grant, developed the strategy of total war. This approach went beyond traditional military engagements, targeting not only enemy armies, but also economic infrastructure and civilian morale. The destruction of the South's railroads, factories, and food supplies during campaigns like General Sherman's March to the Sea reflected a shift in strategic thinking. A recognition that in civil wars, the enemy is often not just the opposing army, but the society that supports it. One of the most significant impacts of civil wars on military strategy has been the evolution of counterinsurgency doctrines. Counterinsurgency, COIN, is a set of military strategies aimed at defeating insurgents, stabilizing territories, and rebuilding societies after conflict. It has become a cornerstone of modern military thought due to its relevance in civil wars, particularly during the 20th and 21st centuries. In these conflicts, conventional military power alone is often ineffective. Insurgencies thrive on support from the local population, making it essential for state forces to win the hearts and minds of civilians. This requires a combination of military, political, and economic efforts, combating insurgents while simultaneously addressing the root causes of rebellion, such as poverty, political exclusion, and ethnic tensions. The Vietnam War, 1955-1975, although not strictly a civil war, involved a significant internal conflict between the communist North Vietnamese forces, which were supported by the Viet Cong insurgents, and the South Vietnamese government, backed by the United States. The US military, initially relying on traditional combat operations, soon realized that defeating the Viet Cong required more than superior firepower. The Viet Cong utilized guerrilla warfare tactics, blending into the civilian population, and employing ambushes, tunnels, and surprise attacks to wear down US and South Vietnamese forces. This forced the US to develop and implement counterinsurgency strategies, including pacification programs that aimed to undermine the Viet Cong's influence among the rural population. These efforts included village defense programs, economic aid, and efforts to root out Viet Cong cells through intelligence operations. Despite these strategies, the US faced immense difficulties in achieving its objectives in Vietnam, illustrating the complexity and challenge of counterinsurgency in civil wars. The war left a lasting impact on military strategy, reinforcing the importance of understanding local dynamics, politics, and culture when engaging in internal conflicts. Civil wars have also spurred technological innovations in warfare. In many cases, these innovations are driven by necessity, as combatants in civil wars often operate with limited resources and must find creative solutions to gain an advantage. From the use of improvised explosive devices, IEDs, to advancements in communication and surveillance, Civil wars have often been incubators for military technologies that later influence broader military strategy. During the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, for example, both sides experimented with new military technologies, such as air power and mechanized units. The conflict served as a testing ground for modern warfare, with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy using the war to try out their military tactics and equipment. The bombing of Guernica, where German aircraft targeted civilians in a deliberate act of terror, foreshadowed the strategic bombing campaigns of World War II. In more recent conflicts, such as the civil wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the use of IEDs by insurgents revolutionized how militaries approached urban combat and convoy protection. The widespread use of drones for surveillance and targeted strikes also emerged from the need to combat insurgencies in complex environments where distinguishing combatants from civilians is difficult. Civil wars are not just fought on battlefields, they are also conflicts of ideology, identity, and loyalty. As a result, psychological and social warfare plays a critical role in civil conflicts. In many cases, civil wars pit neighbours, even families, against one another, blurring the lines between combatants and civilians. This has forced militaries to consider the psychological and societal impacts of their strategies. One of the most powerful examples of psychological warfare in civil wars is the use of propaganda. Both insurgents and state actors use propaganda to demoralize their opponents and win the support of the population. In civil wars, where allegiances can shift rapidly, controlling the narrative becomes just as important as winning battles. Propaganda campaigns can include everything from radio broadcasts and leaflets to social media and cyber warfare in modern conflicts. The ongoing Syrian civil war, which began in 2011, highlights the significant role of psychological and social warfare in modern conflicts. With multiple factions vying for control, including the Assad regime, rebel groups, ISIS, and Kurdish forces, the war has been fought as much in the information sphere as on the ground. Social media has been a critical tool for all sides, used to recruit fighters, disseminate propaganda, and influence international opinion. The Assad regime, for example, has used state-controlled media to portray itself as a stabilizing force against terrorism, while opposition groups have relied on social media platforms to document atrocities and rally international support for their cause. The Syrian conflict also illustrates the role of sectarian and ethnic identities in civil wars. The division between Sunni and Shia Muslims, as well as the Kurdish minority's aspirations for autonomy, has deeply shaped the dynamics of the conflict. This has led to a military strategy that not only targets enemy combatants, but also seeks to manipulate social and political fault lines to gain an advantage. Civil wars have a profound and lasting impact on military strategy. These conflicts force militaries to adapt to irregular warfare, develop counterinsurgency strategies, innovate with limited resources, and engage in psychological and social warfare. The lessons learned from civil wars often shape military thinking for generations, influencing how states and insurgents alike approach future conflicts. As civil wars continue to unfold around the world, they will undoubtedly continue to shape the evolution of military strategy. From the streets of Syria to the jungles of Colombia, civil conflicts remind us that warfare is not just a matter of tactics and technology, but also of ideology, identity, and the human spirit. Military strategies must therefore evolve to reflect the complex realities of civil war, where the fight for control extends far beyond the battlefield.